So now we've heard that spending during the 2025 holiday shopping season in Canada was relatively flat, and that AI was one of the top three stories of the past year. So what does this mean for small business owners across the country? Joining us to share his perspective is Benjamin Jacob. He's the Senior Vice President of Services at MasterCard Canada. Benjamin, thank you for joining me on Just Good Business today.
Thanks for having me, Al.
So let's just look back quickly at the 2025 holiday season. I just heard from our data expert, Sean McCormick, who said spending was relatively flat across the country. How does that align with what MasterCard has been tracking?
Yeah, 2025 was a year of transition. We saw stabilization in spending patterns as consumers became more intentional about being value conscious. So this flat year-over-year performance reflects a consumer that's carefully orchestrating their budget. While top-line growth is moderated, the underlying story was about a shift in how Canadians are spending their money rather than a lack of demand. Stabilization in 2025 has actually set the stage for what we're calling an adaptive economy.
So we've noticed that the traditional shopping calendar is changing. According to Sean McCormick, a day like Boxing Day, which used to be the biggest shopping day, no longer registers as a top shopping day at all. So based on your findings, how has the holiday shopping timeline evolved?
Yeah, it's a great question. This has really changed. I think maybe it's not as much of a surprise for people, but the shopping season's really elongated. And what this really means is that as savvy consumers are seeking value, they're seeking it earlier, and they're spreading their spend across more strategic timeframes. So this whole notion of a Boxing Day peak has evolved into a multi-week marathon, if you will. And as shoppers become more and more proactive in their deal seeking, this allows them to better manage their household cash flow in a value-conscious environment. So I think what's key here is that merchants should really prepare for a season that starts earlier and requires sustained engagement rather than a single-day surge.
So if the window is stretching to more of like a multi-week marathon, I would think that would be a more advantage for a consumer.
Yeah, for sure. So, the savvy consumer really gets the benefit of time, right? They have the ability to orchestrate their spending to maximize their value without compromising their cash flow. So by spreading their purchases over November and even into October, consumers can really avoid that December crunch, right? So they can manage their holiday budget a little bit better. That elongated season also eliminates that idea of inventory anxiety, right? People are worried they won't get that deal, so they want to try and rush out and get them, right? So people have more time to research, compare prices, and make sure that they're getting the best value for their money. So we're seeing that when consumers aren't rushed by that single day deadline, they make more intentional choices, shifting from this idea of like panic buying to selecting gifts and experiences that really have much more emotional value, right? For the business owner, this really means a more predictable flow of traffic, right? The ability to have a deeper relationship with the customer over several weeks rather than just that frantic few hours that you might get on Boxing Day.
Very good. Now, moving into 2026, how do you think that change in kind of consumer behavior, how will that continue?
I think the reality is that this year's consumer really is savvy. They're looking for lower cost substitutes for everyday goods to protect their budgets and really starting to invest more in meaningful moments and travel is what we're starting to see. They're shifting away from goods that aren't as necessary and looking at things like travel and live events. Large scale events in 2026 are really meaningful opportunities. You look back, I know it was talked about in a previous podcast as well. We saw a significant lift from our data as well with the World Series. 27% growth in restaurants and hotels, 45% growth. And we're seeing, similar impact from things like the Taylor Swift concert that you might remember was in 2024. Based on the MasterCard Economic Institute's 2026 outlook, we expect real services spending to reaccelerate and outperform real goods this year. So it's not about spending less necessary. It's about optimizing the necessary and afford the eventful. Clearly, there's a preference for experiences that offer emotional value and gratifications. This really means that merchants can look at the experience as the new product, right? So even goods-based retailers can wrap their offerings in a service-oriented narrative.
That Blue Jay run was so much fun, and you're right. Like it contributed to a lot of spending, and especially in Toronto.
Yeah, it certainly was. We see the positive impact it had on the city. Everybody just had a wonderful vibe going on, and just across the whole country as a whole.
Yeah, amazing. Now, were there any other specific pockets of growth or decline that maybe merchants should be aware of going forward?
Yeah, so kind of just in keeping with what I've been talking about, right? Like merchants realize that holiday wallet has been split. Like we're seeing a decline in traditional gift categories like toys, low-end electronics, right? But a massive appetite for tech and for travel. So when you think about that, like growth, we're seeing in experiences like cruises, hotel stays, air travel. We saw that accelerate through summer 2025, and that's going to continue to outperform traditional retail. Hotel spending was strong in 2025 as more Canadians opted for domestic travel to support local economies. So, one thing we're saying is watch for the savvy pivot. Consumers are trading down on physical goods by finding lower cost substitutes, saving their money to spend on live events and meaningful moments.
Let's move on over to AI now. AI was one of Douglas Porter's top 3 stories of 2025. What do you see as a practical role of AI and digital tools for small businesses going forward?
Yeah, there's no doubt that AI is here and it's here to stay, right? It's being leveraged. And we're seeing that as a key growth driver that's allowing small and medium enterprises to really sharpen their edge.
Right.
You can increase productivity and even navigate some of these macro changes more effectively. So the MasterCard Economic Institute report highlights that technological transformation is a key tailwind for the global economy. So when you think about that, like digital tools can help small businesses catch real-time shifts in consumer demand, which is critical in today's rapidly evolving world, especially as they're starting to compete more and more with larger firms. Leveraging this type of technology can really give them a competitive edge.
So if you're a small business owner, what would you advise them to prepare for this change that's coming?
I'd say, one is embrace the technology. It's something that we're all seeing in our day-to-day lives, but it certainly can help them in their own businesses and look at how that can be a force multiplier for them. But the reality is, success in this type of environment requires you to be agile, and you have to pivot your offerings to stay alert and pay attention to the real-time shifts in consumer demand. Merchants need to be ready to swap in or highlight lower-cost substitute goods to retain price-sensitive customers who are hunting for that value. This year, stay alert to real-time data shifts. It's not an option, but it's necessary, really, for you to be able to navigate the current market. So better data leads to better decisions. Consumers are becoming more strategic orchestrators of their wallets, and they'll optimize their spending on necessities specifically so they don't have to sacrifice travel and experience budgets.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at small business owners who are in the last year with the trade war and stuff, looking for different supply chain options and opportunities, I feel like AI would be a good tool to help in that case.
Yeah, for sure. Like, the tools can help them optimize their business from both maybe looking at how their consumers are spending, but also on their supply side as well. So small businesses are the most vulnerable to these shifts that we're seeing in the digital world, but they're also the most agile to embrace these digital tools, right? So they're not going to be as hindered by some of the larger enterprises. And when we think about it, small businesses are really the heart of our economy. So we want to see them leveraging this technology. You often have less margin for error because they're smaller businesses.
Right.
But if you leverage AI and data-driven insights, you can manage those supply chain disruptions that we got familiar with way back during COVID, and even looking forward as your consumer spending patterns start to change, right? So in 2026, we advise merchants to capitalize on fiscal tailwinds, right? So with tax incentives slated to support R&D, 2026 presents a window for strategic investments in equipment and technology before the full impact of trade-driven prices really is felt. Stay alert to the data.
I love that point. Yeah, you're right. Larger businesses would have a harder time to make the changes necessary, whereas a small business, you have the advantage of being agile.
Yeah, and maybe even it's a bit of a plug, but we have specialized tools, right, provided by MasterCard for small businesses. So we have what's called a cyber security assessment tool and a small business navigator, a suite of resources and cost-saving opportunities from our partners like Moneris.
Okay, well, that's an amazing segue to my last question, which is, if folks wanted to learn more about what MasterCard is doing to support small businesses, where should they go?
Yeah, it's actually really easy. www.mastercard.ca/small business, or check us out on LinkedIn. You can find out a lot of information. We're publishing a lot of relevant data specifically for the Canadian market, not just the global market.
Okay, thank you so much for your time today, Benjamin.
It was a pleasure, Al. Thank you.